Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Mother Hustlers, the podcast. And today we actually have with us the beautiful Cheslyn. And the topic for today is actually going to be grace under pressure, navigating divorce and motherhood. And Cheslyn is going to share some of her experience and advice with us. I'm going to have a wonderful conversation today. So before I kick it off, I'm going to let Cheslyn briefly introduce herself so we can get a little familiar, and then we'll dive right into the questions.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheslyn Hamilton-Walker, founder of Gracefully Affirming Consulting, which is a coaching business helping women of color who need a little grace in their lives and need to learn how to find grace under pressure. I love the topic. I'm a mother of two, mostly teenagers now. Keeping my fingers crossed as I get over this last hurdle. But I'm also a licensed social worker and a therapist. So glad to be here, ready to get and excited to get into this conversation.
Absolutely. So, this conversation is all about embracing grace in the midst of divorce or just even a relationship breakdown, and then having to navigate motherhood, career, and your personal life on top of that. And you know what? That can make things really complex because motherhood, in and of itself, is a full-time job, never mind having your personal life and other factors kind of influence how that flows. So to kick things off, I'm just going to ask you, can you share with us a bit about your journey through divorce and how it intersected with your experience of motherhood?
So, yeah, my divorce was interesting. I was married for approximately 7 years. And I always preface when I tell people this story, I always preface it in saying it wasn't traditional marriage in the sense of we fell in love, we had this long dating courtship, we did fall in love, but then we had a baby really quickly and we had to do life. And
Yep.
so because of that, we did our best to kind of buckle down and be parents, and we were both in school. We were both doing a lot. We, had to work and navigate all of that. And, the pressure of not really knowing each other enough kind of,
Yeah.
took a toll on our relationship. And the eventual breakdown ended up, where, we filed for divorce. It was a tough road because I used to think of it as a failure. And I used to be super, super embarrassed about it because I was like, did I try hard enough? Was it
Yeah.
me? Could I have done better? Now look at these kids. I have to raise them and talk to them about
Yeah.
this and, not be bitter or angry and still, and in going through it, I realized that I had to wear so many different hats,
I
because
can
at the same
imagine.
time, I was just starting in my career. I was navigating just being a parent. My kids were still young. I had a 7-year-old at the time and a 3-year-old, well, 2 going on 3. And so even just trying to figure out life doing that and then doing it on my
Hmm.
own in the midst of the divorce, because, divorces take a couple of years to actually be
Right.
finalized. And so that all connected to kind of help me get closer to who I am as a woman, because it was in that moment that I was like, okay, wait, you're not as lost as you think you are. You don't
Right.
have to be so scared of everything, and it helped me in my career because it also helped me to help other women as I was
Right.
working as a social worker and as I was working in case management with women who are coming in with a variety of different challenges, mental health challenges, substance use challenges, in the midst of being mothers and
Yeah.
women and sisters and aunts and navigating that. And it was a lot, but I got through it,
You
thank
did.
Thank God. And one thing I always add is that I think the one thing that defined it was the grace that I found within it. Not,
You
through it.
yeah, you mentioned such an important point. Many mothers feel such a pressure to uphold a facade of strength, even when we may be struggling internally.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how like you gave yourself grace and you kind of found out more about yourself. But how did you like truly cope with that expectation that, I can't let my kids see me like, or did you just say like, you know what? this is a part of life. Going through things is a part of life. And like, you can't protect your kids 100% from that.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I definitely had that same sentiment. Like, I have to be strong. I can't let them see me crumble under the pressure. I can't be the bitter black woman,
Right.
angry black woman figure. I have to be this, stand up, doing everything right. And that took a toll because in social services, you have to be strong for other people outside of your
Right.
home. And so it was pressure on pressure on pressure on pressure. And to be honest, because there was so much pressure that I was experiencing in my marriage, I took a break. And that break ended, like, led to the final breakdown because it was a lot
Mm,
for me. And so
right.
as I was going through it, I realized that, wait, I don't have to be this strong. And I realized that I could be vulnerable. I had to embrace
So
vulnerability.
important.
Yeah. There's a quote that I heard, I think it was a podcast recently, and I'm going to butcher it, but I wrote it down because I was like, I remember it, and I always want to carry it with me. It says, vulnerability begins with honesty.
Mm, that is
And
good.
I don't remember if the person said this part or if I added it. I don't know. I don't want to take credit, but I might take credit. I'm not sure. But I said it ends with accountability. And I feel like I had to learn to be honest with my children,
Yeah.
and not just say everything is perfect because they could see.
Yeah.
They could
Kids
see
are so
everything.
intuitive. They are so
Yes.
intuitive. And that's a lesson that I'm learning myself in terms of like being vulnerable with my kids, particularly my 8-year-old,
Yeah.
because he can see when I'm not feeling my
Mhm.
best or I'm not 100%. And we're so quick when the kids, how are you? You okay? And you, yeah, I'm good. But they know that you're not. So I
Yeah.
stopped leaning into always saying, I'm okay. And just
Yeah.
sometimes saying, you know what? I don't feel the best right now. I'm
Yeah.
upset or whatever the case may be, because I try to teach my son, my 8-year-old, that having big emotions is okay. Because he does have a lot of big emotions, and I don't want to make him feel like that's wrong. It's
Yeah.
more so about how you process the emotions. And like you said,
Yeah.
taking accountability, right? So I think that's
Definitely.
so important as a lesson for ourselves,
Yeah.
as mothers, as parents on a whole, and something that that we should instill in our kids, that
Yeah.
it's okay to have these feelings, it's okay, process it, take accountability, and then now
Mhm.
what's next?
Yes. Yes. It's always good to ask that what's next after you've done all that processing, because it's like, okay, what do I do now? How do
Yeah.
I incorporate this into the moving forward? Right. And
Hmm.
that's one of the tenets behind gracefully affirming. It's, yes, we have grace. Grace is great. You can pull it from God, you can get it from a lot of different places, but how do you use it? What next? How do you
Right.
move forward with it so that it becomes a part of who you are? Right. And it doesn't mean that I'm soft and demure and
Right.
it doesn't mean that. It's just an essence that you carry with yourself that says, this is who
Absolutely.
I am. Right. And I was thinking about your podcast title. It says Mother Hustlers. And I said, when I first saw it, I was like, I'm not a hustler. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
was,
No.
but then I really sat with it. I did some journaling and I was like, wait, there's different ways to hustle. You know,
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't have to be like rushing around. Like, I could be like quiet and calm, cool and collected, and still get my way forward and still do what I
Yep.
need to do. And I realized how it intersected with gracefully affirming, because I'm like, that's exactly what I did. I was hustling my way through this relationship, this career,
Yeah.
you but I was just doing it in a different way.
I'm so glad that you actually mentioned that, because when people see hustler,
Mhm.
they automatically a lot of times think of like the hustle mentality of like, oh
Yeah.
man, we have to work 24 hours a day to make that bag, to make that money.
Mhm.
And I actually didn't mean it in that way. And those who understood, understood.
Yeah.
It was more so that as moms, we juggle a lot. There's
Yes.
always something on the go, something moving. So although
Mhm.
we might not be hustling in what some people might consider the traditional sense, we're always
Yeah.
hustling because we got to get kids places. We got to make
Mhm.
sure kids understand something. We got to take care of ourselves. We got to go to work. We got to keep the house. We got to keep our relationships. And there's
Yeah,
all these moving pieces that whether we're quietly or loudly, we're hustling to keep it all together.
perfect. I love that. I love the way you put that.
Yeah, because I was just like, man, like when you think of like your slow day, like
Yeah.
weekends are a slower day for me, but I still have
Mhm.
basketball for my son, prepping for the week, did I making lists of like what I might have forgotten for
Mhm.
work last week,
Yeah.
taking care of myself, like
Cleaning,
cleaning, yeah. And there's so much,
grocery
and that's a
shopping.
slow day. And these are the slow days, right? So
Exactly.
it just took on another meaning for me, mother hustler. And I'm glad that that's something that you understood and that you even understand for your business and how you
Yeah.
help women, because there's so many moving parts that we have, and we need to take grace,
Yeah.
we need to take accountability, and we need to plan for what's next.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
when we talk about all of that, you are
Mhm.
balancing the demands of motherhood, you're balancing the demands of a new career, and
Mhm.
then your personal life shifting into a new normal, if you want to call that.
Mhm.
And that can be really overwhelming for anybody. So
Yeah.
how did you navigate the juggling act of all of this amidst, divorce?
The one thing that, if I were to say was the top of helping me navigate through that, was creating a new and solid support circle.
Mhm.
Having a team of people. And I'll preface this by saying I'm a quiet, introverted person. I don't talk to a lot of people, right? Also, let me add to that, I moved from St. Kitts to New York with very limited family here. So I don't have a lot of people like, I'm gonna go by Auntie so and so, I'm gonna go by
Right.
cousin so and so,
I
and the
understand
family
that
that
so deeply.
yeah, the family that was here, I wasn't really connected to, I didn't know them that well to
Right.
really be connected to them. And so, going through divorce was a super lonely experience for me because I had allowed myself to cut off from people. And I didn't, I realized that I had to rebuild
Yeah.
people around me. I had to rebuild some sort of hedge that would support me in a way that I needed to be supported. Because if I didn't
Mhm.
have them, it would have been like, okay, what am I doing?
Yeah,
Who do I go
absolutely.
to? How can I get help? And it varied from a variety of people. I joined a church. I found a new spiritual community. And when I left St. Kitts, I was like, church, what? Like, I don't, God is here. I was very much like, I
Right?
can do it right here. And I met a woman, surprisingly to my ex-husband, right? Who turned out to be my spiritual mother. And to like, my mom's deceased, FYI. She's been deceased since I was 10. And so I didn't even have a demonstration for what doing womanhood and motherhood really looked like, honestly.
Right.
But I met this woman and she took me under her wing. And even though she was a bishop in the church, it wasn't always just a spiritual thing. It was a woman to woman
Right.
thing. It
Yeah,
was I got you. What do you need? Whether we need to pray, I just need to call you and talk. You want to go to the festival, I'll
that's
rock with
awesome.
you. She did that for me. She introduced me to the church family. I also had a lot of other friends that I had kind of gained along the way who helped me navigate things. I started going to women empowerment classes and workshops.
Mhm.
I met another lady, shout out to her, Aisha Nuraj. She has an organization called My Empowerment My Way. And it was there that it kind of was like, oh, I could really do this.
Yeah.
I could really do this. And she would, flood me with little things here or there. I love the way she does it. And then in the midst of it, I started dancing again. I joined a whole Congolese
Ooh.
dance company
Okay. I love
with
it.
2 kids. A
I'm
whole
here for
dance
it though.
company I joined. Yes, because I'm a former dancer. I danced for the Okolo Tegramantine Art Theater in St. Kitts.
I remember
And
them.
hey, shout out to Okolo. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember when I left St. Kitts, I didn't dance. I didn't do anything because I
Mhm.
felt like I ain't got time for that. I got school and that's it. And so when I met another lady called Eto Chana, and she said, hey, I think I answered an ad for a class or something. And she was like, you got some style. You should come with us and, dance with us. And I joined and we did I went to Canada. I've been to Toronto because
Ooh,
we
okay.
danced
I
at the
like
whole
it.
festival there, right? And so doing that gave me more confidence. It gave me a lot more support. It allowed me to be vulnerable in different ways, not just with the family,
Yeah.
but with new people. It allowed me to step out of my shell at work. I had a super strong supportive work family. And FYI, I wrote a book about this. So I talk about it a lot in my book. I had a strong core of people along the way that were just like every step I made, there was somebody there.
Yeah.
Somebody new, somebody old that was just like, all right, I got you. What we doing? We moving forward. Okay, all right, okay. And it just kept every step. It was like it was divine.
Yeah, you're making my heart smile because one of the big conversations that I have on this podcast is the importance of a support system. And this is
Yes.
something I realized myself, similar to you. I live in
Mm-hmm.
Canada. My mom still lives in St. Kitts. Some of my siblings still live in St. Kitts. And then my
Mm-hmm.
other siblings are like in the States. So I'm like the only one in my immediate family in Canada.
Wow.
So I had my first son, and it was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, having a baby can't be that hard. Like you figure it out. It comes naturally, right? But then you
Yeah,
start realizing like, oh my God, I don't know it all. And there's so
exactly.
much of a learning curve. And then when you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to balance like a career, a relationship,
Yeah,
and all of that while having a kid, you need to have people that you can lean on. And then not
yeah.
having immediate family that I personally could lean on was hard. Like my hubby, he has his immediate family here. He grew up here, although he's
Mm-hmm.
from Jamaican descent. I didn't
Okay.
have that. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned to make friends. So I leaned into like my neighbors and stuff like that. And now I have like my
Right.
core little group who, if I
Yes.
can't go pick up my son, I can say, "Can you please?" And they'll say, "No worry, I got you." If I
I
say,
love
I
it.
need this or whatever, I got you. And
Yep.
I realized how important that was because in the first year of having my son, I lived in a condo and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know any of my neighbors, didn't talk to nobody.
Mm.
And
Sounds
when
like
I
me with
actually
LinkedIn.
right? When I actually moved into a neighborhood and started making those relationships and having those friends and those people I could depend on, I was like, oh my gosh, why was I
Mm-hmm.
like this? Life is so much easier
It is.
when you have that core group that you can depend on. And
Yes.
one of the things I always tell people is that when you think of a support system, it doesn't have to be your family. It could be a neighbor, it could be a coworker, it could be, like you said, your church members. It could be
Mm-hmm.
anybody that is willing to open their heart and their mind to you
Yeah.
and be that person for you and for you to reciprocate and also kind of be that person for them as
Yeah.
well, right? So I love that you said that a support system was such an
Mhm.
integral part of you taking that step forward. But I also got a shout out. I love that you did the dancing because as moms, so many times we have these hobbies and these
Mhm.
passions that we want to do, and we're like, I don't have time. I got kids. I'm a mom. I'm a mother. I don't have time. I got kids, and we don't make time for
Mhm.
ourselves. So I absolutely love that you prioritized yourself in that way to
I did.
reconnect with something that you were so passionate about previously. I love that. I love it for you.
Thank
Ne-
you. And let me tell you, I don't think if I hadn't started going through the divorce process, I would have done it
mm,
because I would have been so entrenched in wife, mother, all these
yeah,
other things. Because, part of what I was feeling at the end was like lost, like a loss of who I was, a loss of my
right.
sense of who I was. And I started questioning, like, who do I know? Like, who I don't even like me. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't even know me. And
Mm,
so when I joined that group, and I'm talking about, we would have rehearsals for 4 hours, and the kids were there. I
wow,
would
that's
meal
good.
prep, pack up. Like, we would go pick them up from school, go, they sit down, homework, dinner is ready because I packed it already. And then
That's
we go
good.
rehearse, da, 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 and then we go home. And it was such a part of our routine. And it was good for
Yeah,
them because they also met other people. They got to
right.
play with the other kids that were there. They also got to see different places, because we would go to certain like day festivals, Saturday festivals to perform, and they would be a part of it. And so having that sense of community that just
Yeah,
like,
that's
you know, I just always felt supported every step of that way. And I think that's one of the things, like in my book, I talk about it, like building a routine that works for you and also like revisiting hobbies and stuff, but also,
Yep.
like you said, reciprocating with the people that are there to help. Because a lot of times people are around, we just don't really tap into them, because we're like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to judge,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't want this person to feel like, I don't have
That is
enough or
so true.
whatever. And so we hold off and hold back thinking that we are doing ourselves a favor, and we're really doing ourselves a disservice by not being vulnerable with the people around us. Now, I ain't say you got to tell them every nitty gritty of your story,
Right.
but you can give them enough information so that they know how to support
Make
you and they
that
know how to
connection. Yeah.
exactly and give you that connection that you need. And so that was huge for me because I am an only child. And so I'm very used to being alone. And my friends would say, I don't call as much as I should because I'm so used to being by myself. And I'm just like, man, I
Right.
am in my own world. But I've over the years and I've learned to like, no, you gotta check in with people. You gotta check
Yeah.
in on those that check in with you. And I've
Yep.
maintained some
Absolutely.
great friendships as a result.
That's good. It's good that you kind of took ability in that way. Now, when we think of all the progress you made and like the changes that occurred in your life,
Mhm.
did you did you encounter any unexpected challenges or hurdles as you navigated like the complexity of all these changes?
A lot. There's always challenges that are along any journey. But I also believe that it's how you approach them and how you view
Hmm.
them. For me, perspective is everything. I'm the one at work that walks in and be like, it's almost Friday. I'm seeing on a Monday. And they look at me like, girl, it is 9 o'clock. And I'm like, I don't care. It's almost Friday. I'm going to waltz through this week. And so one of the first major challenges that I faced was at the beginning of the divorce. I was really still kind of doing it alone, not telling a lot of people what I
Hmm.
was. And I remember, because transparently, he served me. And when it happened, I was already in the process of like, okay, we're not in a good space. I might have to leave. Like, I was living with his family and I was like, what am I going to do? And I had been saving, I had
Right.
taken an entry level job, mind you, with a bachelor's degree. I was cooking in a residence for 6 in the morning, making grits and eggs and stuff. And I was hustling, doing what I had to do. And I was saving money and saying, okay, I got to get out. I got to get out. I got to get out. And I
Hmm.
remember having that paperwork that I got, and I was like, okay, I probably need to get a lawyer. I probably need to figure out what to do next. And I had worked in family child welfare, and I had called some contacts and I said to them, like, hey, I don't know what to do. Can you give me a reference to somebody, anybody?
Right.
And one of the attorneys had said, hey, you know what? I know this guy. Talk to them. I walk into the office, tell him my story, give him all the information. He goes, yeah, great. I can represent you $3,000 up front.
Ooh.
Now, truth be told, I had only raised $3,000. I had only saved $3,000 up until that point.
Right.
And I'm like, rent for a new apartment, lawyer, rent for a new apartment, lawyer.
Right. Oh
And
my
I remember
God.
walking out of the office and I walked into, it was across the street. His office was close enough to downtown Brooklyn at the time, and it was across the street from a Panera Bread. And I walked in there, went all the way up in the back, sat down, opened up a book, and cried, like with my
Oh.
back. Like I cried because I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And then in that moment, it was like, as I was crying, tears rolling down, I'm trying to hide it because, I'm in a public place. I don't want to be that person. And something said, you have everything you need to move forward in this process.
Mm.
Nothing is going to be a hurdle for you. And so
Right.
I learned to see things not as challenges so much, but more as, okay, this is an opportunity for me to learn something or do something
Right.
different or take a different direction or learn to pivot. And so I walked back across the street to the courthouse, went down in the basement, asked some questions. They gave me a whole packet. It was like, oh, here, follow these. And then I walked into court, weeks later, and I represented myself.
Okay.
That was a huge challenge because he had a lawyer, and every
Yeah.
time we went to court, the judge was like, So Miss Walker, but in my mind, I'm like, I can afford, I know they're gonna offer it to me, but I still have to pay the person when it's all said and done. And I couldn't afford to do it and still move out with my children. It was a
Right.
lot. So that was one of the biggest challenges. And I felt like once I overcame that, everything else seemed a little easier. Everything else seemed like, okay, I got this. Oh, it's not that serious.
It's one of the things that I'm going to pull from that is perspective.
Yes.
How perspective can change so much, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you could be like down in the dumps thinking like you are at the bottom of the literal barrel. But
Mm-hmm.
if you flip the perspective,
Yeah.
it kind of opens doors for you. Because I've been in experiences where I'm like, okay, this is it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm doing from here. But you
Yeah.
take that moment to take, I always tell people it's important to take a few breaths.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
take those deep breaths, slow your mind down a little bit,
Yeah.
calm down, take all the emotion out of it
Yeah.
initially, and then start thinking. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard. It's hard because as women we're wired to be a little bit more emotional, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Don't shoot
Yeah.
me.
So
But
I believe you. I agree.
sometimes you do have to take that breath and just kind
Yeah.
of slow things down a little bit, slow down the thoughts, take a
Yeah.
minute, process, and then, okay, this is what I got to do next. Because
Yeah.
if you wallow in those feelings, then it's so hard to climb out of them. You'll be there for a
Very
long time
true.
feeling like there is no way out. There's
Yeah.
no other option. There's no other opportunity. So
Mhm.
it's so important to take that moment. So I'm glad that you talked about like flipping the perspective and being like,
Mhm.
okay, I got this. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I'm gonna literally put my big girl panties on and
Yeah.
figure this out one way or another.
One way or another. I think that's one of the one of the signature things that I don't want to say teach, but like I bring into my practice as a therapist and even as a
Hmm.
coach, because it's like I hear all of that, I validate your story,
Yeah.
great. Okay, can we look at this a different way? Right? Because
Hmm.
there's always a
Absolutely.
different way to look at it. Right? It may not be
Absolutely.
the nicest way, may not be, you may not want to hear it, right? It may
Right.
sound a little hurtful or hard to hear, but can we shift it and look at it from a different perspective? Because once you're able to do that, then you're able to, okay, I can do it differently. I
Yep.
don't have to respond in this particular way. I can choose a different course of response. And I think that to me is the biggest thing that helps people to actually be transformative in anything that they're doing.
Yes, I 100% agree. I believe that 100%. And it took me a while to
Yeah.
get to that point because I would be that person. I would get so consumed by what I was feeling.
Mm,
And I would get consumed. It would eat me up inside.
yeah.
And when you feel like that, you don't always make the right decisions.
No.
You get very toxic or toxic, or
Mhm.
if you want to say destructive, because you're
Yeah.
not thinking right. You're
Mm,
feeding off of negative emotions. And it
yeah.
took me a while to get to that point where it was like everything doesn't require an instant reaction.
Exactly.
You got to take time and
Exactly.
process. And
Exactly.
I think that's a journey that we all have to go on. Some of us get there quicker than others, but
Yeah.
it's so important to realize everything does not require an immediate response or reaction.
Yes.
Processing is so important.
It is. That's chapter one in my book, by the way. Start with grace. It's
Okay.
like awareness, taking the time
Yeah.
to process and be aware of like what's actually happening. Where am I now? And what
Yeah.
do I want to do differently or to feel differently or to be different? You know, it starts there. The first step
Hmm.
is knowing, understanding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good lesson, honestly. Now, when you think about your experiences, we kind
Mhm.
of talked about the family, we talked a little bit about your support system. How did the experience, or did it even affect your career trajectory or your career goals? Like, did it influence maybe decisions you made career wise? Did it
Mhm.
influence you to become an entrepreneur? Like, how did it affect that?
So, ooh, I love this question. It affected it in a lot of different ways. At first, prior to divorce, I never saw myself as anything more than just, well, I got this psychology degree, I'm just gonna work, and whatever.
Hmm.
I've always wanted to be a therapist somewhere deep in my core, but never really saw it for
Right.
myself. And so I was very content at that point. But going through the divorce, and moving out and being on my own, I went from working in child welfare and having this particular perspective to transitioning into mental health. And I think that was the game changer for me. And,
Hmm.
I was fortunate enough to, be hired by a company that valued people learning and moving up
That's
and just
awesome.
educating themselves. And so when I started off, I started as a case manager, and I was like, I don't know anything, just teach me.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
good.
even though I had years of experience doing, case planning already, I was like, I don't know anything, teach me everything. And they were eager. And so I always had great supervisors who would push me. And then I remember one day, this one of the senior VPs saw me one day at some event at one of our houses, and they spoke to another VP. And before you know it, I was getting a call like, yeah, you're going to be promoted. I didn't ask.
Oh,
Mind you, I had been doing my manifestation work. I was like, I want more than this. I know I could do more than this, but I wasn't telling
yeah.
anybody. It was just in my head. And I remember it was like, oh, no, we have another spot. We think you'll be great for it. We love your personality. We see your vision and that you are willing to do a lot of different things, and we want you over here. And then I went from case manager to supervisor. And then I went from
That's
supervisor,
awesome.
I was there, and it was like, you need to go back to school. You need to, I see more for you. Go get your master's. That's how I ended up going in that direction. And then I
Wow.
was social work, mental health counseling. Oh, social work allows you to have so much more,
Yeah.
you can do so much more with a social work degree, in my opinion. Sorry. No shade to the mental health counselors. However, I also was, because I was in leadership at the time, or on a trajectory towards leadership, I figured doing social work, I can get the best of both worlds. I can get case
Yeah.
management, I can get leadership, and then I can get the clinical aspect of the work. And so from there, it was like, oh, okay, once that was done, here's another opportunity. One of my mentors was like, you're going to apply over here. I'm going to send your resume. I didn't even apply. Boom, associate director. It was just like going and going and going. And I think if I hadn't gone through that experience, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to step into those rooms and just be
So it's like a
myself, because
catalyst.
it definitely was, because sometimes I will go in and be like, they have those who, like, they walk into a room and everybody looks at them and be like,
Yeah.
who's who. And I would start going to these, we call division meetings, where all the directors are, and then you have the strong personalities, and then you have the other ones who are just like, okay, yeah, I'm just here. And I was like, I don't even know where I fit in, because, like, I don't see myself
Right.
in any of them. But having to learn to be comfortable with myself enough to say, you got this. Your quiet hustle, your quiet grace can take you through it and help you get to that next step, till I, eventually got to a program director, and I did that for a couple of years. I ran a program. And then, after that was like, okay, what's next? And then I moved to Connecticut, and I decided, like, no, I want to go full time into therapy, because I was doing it part time.
Yeah.
And I kind of also want to do coaching, because a lot of what I realize in the therapy practice is, especially with young women in 30s and 40s age range, yes, they have the diagnoses, but at the same time, they're looking for coaching through right
Yeah.
everyday situations that they're struggling to manage, or struggling to see a different perspective, or struggling to, just overcome. And then the more I stepped into that, I was like, I think there's a space for this where
Yeah,
it doesn't have,
absolutely.
you don't have to be diagnosed with something to get help, to
Yeah.
help get some direction.
Sometimes we're just looking for a little guidance, a little mentorship, a little direction. But there's
Yes.
something that you said that was really interesting to me, and I want people to take away.
Yeah.
When you kind of started seeing more for yourself in your career, one of the big things that you did was you were willing to learn. And I think
Yes.
that's so important when we think about career and career growth. You got to
Mhm.
be willing to learn.
Yeah.
And I always think of that saying where it's like you don't always want to be the smartest person in the room. You always want to find that person and learn from them and like keep
Yes.
moving to other rooms and keep learning, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's so important because I know, like for me, when I got started moving into my like marketing career,
Mm-hmm.
I applied for a job that I wasn't qualified for in any way, but I got
Mm-hmm.
a call. And
Oh,
I went
okay.
to the interview and they were like, "Do you know how to use this software, that software?" I was like, "I don't, but I'm willing to learn."
And that's the
And I
key.
yeah, the transparency. I was like, listen, I don't know any of this stuff, but
Hmm.
I am willing to learn. I'm eager to learn. I'm a sponge. Let me
Yeah.
soak it up. And the I remember the hiring manager, she said to me, she said, "You know what? I'm gonna take a chance on you
Hmm.
because you're willing to learn and I don't have a problem teaching because
Yeah.
I need somebody that has a very specific set of skills.
Hmm.
And if I can get somebody in who's willing to learn to fit this role, I'm
Yeah.
willing to put in the extra time." And she's like, "We got budget for classes. So anything you need to
Mm.
learn, we could sign you up for a session and you can get that knowledge and we could keep you moving." And that always stayed with me because I never had a manager previous to that who was like, "Let's get you educated. Let's get you what you need to be to grow." And ever since then, I've been in leadership roles. I
Mhm.
always kind of I try my best. I can't say I've always succeeded, but I
Yeah.
always try my best to be somebody that tries to work in a collaborative manner,
Yeah.
and I try to mentor and I try to help people grow
Yeah.
because those were the managers that stood out for me, and I only hope to emulate that in
Hmm.
when leading others. But it's so important being willing to learn.
Yes. I love that because sometimes, like you said, we walk into rooms and we think we know it. And yes, we might. We might have some of the knowledge, if not most of the knowledge. But being, vulnerable enough to say, I don't know it all, right? I think what's that quote like, to know is to know that you know nothing at all or something like that.
Yep.
And the
Hmm.
reality is we don't know it all and we can learn so much from people, whether it's the
Absolutely.
smartest person in the room with the biggest degree and the most credentials or the person who's sweeping and can say something that could be just as profound. It doesn't matter. You can learn from anybody. And when I was in leadership as well, I always took the time and I loved people who would come to me and say, I don't know, can you just help me? I would be at home sometimes like, okay, let me just create this document so you can have this process, or at least you can have it to take with you. And I'm doing the cheat sheets for people. And, because that's the type of, like, I like collaboration. Like, let's do this together.
Yep.
I have resources. I'm ready to just flood you with them if you want them. You can come to me and talk about it. We can sit in supervision. And in social services is like we have what we call supervision, right? It's like having a
Yep.
meeting with your manager. And a lot of times in some supervision, it's more like, what cases do you have? Okay, what's this person doing? What is this person doing? Da, 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 da. But for me, it's more like, okay, yes, we can talk about the work, but we need to also talk about you and your development and where you're
Yes.
going and what you need and what can I do to support that. Because when you're
Absolutely.
good, you're happy, you're healthy, you're whole, I get great work out of you, right?
Hmm.
If I'm not, if you're like progress notes all the time, you're gonna just be
And
like ready to go to the
there's
door.
right, and there's so many leaders that don't realize that helping your team members grow,
Yes.
helping them feel valued, helping
Mhm.
them feel qualified, helping them feel like they're an important part of the team
Yeah.
only benefits everyone. It benefits you as a manager, it benefits
Yeah.
the organization as a whole. So management shouldn't just be about like, let me just delegate tasks and let's
Mhm.
get the process done. There's so much more than that in terms of the relationship between manager and subordinates and just helping people grow. Because the one thing that I always take into account is that most people work because they have to, right?
Yes.
We got bills to pay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are here because they have to be here. But what can you do to make it a job that they're passionate about, to make
Yeah.
it a career and not a job, and make it an experience that they can meet when they come into work? It's not like, oh my gosh, I gotta
I'm
go to
here.
work again. I hate this job. Oh my gosh, I gotta apply for some other jobs while I'm on my
Hmm.
break. We can
Yep.
make the experience a good one. And I love when people tell me like, oh, I love my job. Like my job's great. Of course it
Mhm.
has some bumps in the road here and there, but
Mhm.
I'm actually passionate about my job. And I
Yeah.
think more of us who end up in leadership roles should strive to help people and something to point out, help people who want to be helped.
Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And it's all about the connections you make, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's taking your personal essence and saying, I have some value to add to this situation, but I
Yep.
don't have it all. Because this
Yeah.
other person in the dynamic is also bringing something of value. How can we connect it
Absolutely.
and make it something that could blossom into, whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish here, whether it's the company's goals or our own personal goals, because
Absolutely.
they say people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers a lot of times, right?
Facts. Facts. I've never actually, in myself included, I've never met somebody who said I left a job somewhere
Hmm.
because it was the actual job. It always comes down to the person above them. They
Yeah.
were mismanaged, they were micromanaged, they weren't
Hmm.
respected,
Hmm.
and it becomes something that just gnaws away
Yeah.
at you, and then you're just like, I gotta get out. And oh, that point is so, like, it is so important to mention. So
Hmm.
I try to think about that every day when I'm doing when I'm dealing with my team, because it's like, do you need to say this? Is there a
Yeah.
better way you can say this? Can this person contribute in that way? How can I contribute to them? How can
Yeah.
I help them? And I'm trying to be a more empathetic manager, because I
Yeah.
think empathy is what's missing a lot of the times. We
It
don't see
is.
things from other people's perspectives, and we
Yeah.
don't try to understand. So it's so important to understand on so many different levels,
Yeah.
because we don't know what people are going through outside of work,
Yeah.
and we don't know what people are feeling or experiencing while they're at work, when you speak to them, when you ask them to do things. So it's
Yeah.
always good to be kind of to just have that empathy. Take a
Yeah.
minute. Like I said, everything doesn't need an immediate
Does.
reaction. Take a minute, process, and think about how you speak to people, how you treat
Yeah.
people. And I think that's so important.
And be creative in supporting them, right? Just like as
Yeah.
mothers, we have to learn to be creative with our children. Okay, I want him to eat the
Yes.
peas, but he don't like the peas, so I got to figure out a way to give him the peas and have him have the peas, you know. And so we learn a lot of lessons as mothers that we can take into
Yes.
versus, hey, I can use this skill that I have with my toddler. With us, it sounds weird and bad, but I can use it at work because it can get the same outcome.
Preach.
At the end of the day, it's about the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And learning to be creative. And one of the things that I stayed in child welfare for almost 4 years, and it was tough. And I would say foster care, kids, parents, families being ripped apart. It was a lot to deal with,
Yeah.
especially coming from a country where you didn't see that. You weren't
Right.
in the trenches of that. And so it was a lot to digest for me. But I stayed because I had a really good manager, a really
Hmm.
good manager who took the time to not just say work, 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 deadline, 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 was like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
She would text on the weekend, just like, hey, how was the family? How are the kids? If there was an event she thought I would be interested, she shot it over and she said, hey, this sounds like something up your alley. You might want to go, And so when I had her, it also gave me the demonstration of, okay, if I were ever in that role, this is what I would like to do.
Yes.
This is who I would like to be. I had another manager who would literally sit with me and talk about, okay, so what are we doing after this? It's like, what's your 2-3 year plan? And I had never had anyone do that before. I
Yeah.
don't even know. Like, I just got a degree. I don't know. I just want to work.
Nobody's ever asked me this before. What kind of questions
Exactly.
are these?
Exactly. And what all of that came together so that when I became a director, it was like, okay, here's how I want to run my team. Right. And
Yeah.
we weren't like, I won't say like I was striving to be the best team. Like I may not have been the most vocal person in all the meetings, but my
Yep.
team was solid. They
That's good.
they stuck in, they did what they needed to do, and even if they had difference of opinions or they didn't agree with something that I said, we would sit and we would reason. We would be like, listen, because I'm a transparent person. I'm not going to tell all the tea of the corporate stuff, but I'm going
Right.
to speak to you in a way that you understand why this decision is happening and why is it affecting you. And here's why it's important for you to just kind of ride it out until we get to this
Yep.
next phase, because this is what's going to happen later. I can't give you all the details. And I could say, I'm sure they would say it too, that they appreciate, right? Because it
Absolutely.
wasn't just do it, because we need the numbers. It was, here's how it's connected. Here's why it's important. Here's, if we don't get it done, this is how it would affect us in 5, 6 months or next year when budget is due and we don't have those numbers. And when they learn that, because I like to educate. When I educated them on the whole process, it was like, oh, okay, all right, I don't like it, but I'm gonna do it.
You made a valid point earlier where it was like, use the tools from motherhood in
Yes.
corporate, right? And what you just explained there is a tactic we use in motherhood as well, right?
Mhm.
Because kids don't like to hear, do it because I'm mom. Why? But
Yeah.
why? How come?
How come?
So you so you find yourself having to educate, right? You go
Yeah.
through like, I need you to do XYZ because blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And this is the outcome.
Yeah.
And for them to get a better understanding of why this needs to happen that way. And I think it's so important that you brought that up because, like you said, as moms, sometimes we put ourselves in that box. We're a
Yeah.
mom, we turn that off, we go into the office, we're
Hmm.
now manager, supervisor,
Hmm.
specialist, whatever we are, whatever role we're in. And we kind of turn the mom off. But it's like, do you need to turn the mom off? Or do you need to turn that up on high?
Yeah.
Because there's so many skills from being a mom that translate. We
Yeah.
manage people. We
Hmm.
multitask.
Yeah.
There's so many skills, right? And it's like it does cross over. And maybe we need to embrace that more
Yeah.
because being a mother, you also have to take empathy into account,
Yeah.
right? You have to think about your tone of
Understanding.
voice,
Yeah.
how you speak to a person, understanding, and all these things. So it's like now that I sit and like I stew on it a little bit more, it's like, should we be listing mother on our resume? Because it legitimately is an important skill, right?
It is. It definitely is. And in most of my interviews, especially from like, because it's been in social services, I always tell people I'm a parent, right? And it may not always be like great for everybody because they were like, okay, what does that mean? But what that means is that I can juggle multiple things at once, right?
Yeah,
And I can do it in a way where kids understand. They may fight a little bit, they may push a little bit, but we're gonna get it. We're gonna make it work. We're gonna get what we need to get done. I focus on
right.
outcomes in my household, right? And so if I'm bringing that same attention to my job, then I'm not just showing up and collecting a paycheck and being like, oh well, whatever, right? I'm like, oh no, okay, the outcome is this. So here's what needs to go into place to get this. And it's the same thing we do when we run our households. We look at the end result. We need to get groceries. We need to get this because we need to make dinner. What kind of dinner we need to make? Okay, if that's the case, we need to know what we're getting at the grocery store ahead of time.
Right.
We prepare, we plan, we put a lot of effort into it. And that goes over into our other aspects of our
Yep,
lives.
definitely. Now, looking back on your journey, going through divorce, being a mom, moving up the career ladder, what has been the most valuable lessons that you've learned about resilience, grace, and the strength of mothers in the face of adversity?
One of the things since being introduced to you and listening to your podcast and stuff, one of the biggest things I realized was a lesson was that my hustle doesn't have to be noisy. It could be quiet, it could be determined, it could be poised, it could be
Yep.
strategic.
Yes.
And that for me is a huge lesson that I've learned. I also learned to say, like, I don't have to do what everyone else is doing. And it sounds cliche, but
Hmm.
like, I have to remind myself that a lot because when you see other people showing up in spaces and you're like, well, oh, that looks great, that looks nice, I want to kind of do that. And then you realize that I can't do that because that's not me. It doesn't look as authentic,
Right.
on me. I also learned that my grace can be impactful, even though it's not a quality that you hear thrown around a lot.
Yep.
Lately, it's, people say, oh, give yourself grace, right? But what does that look like, right?
What does it mean?
What does it mean, right? So we say a lot of things and we have no idea what they mean. We throw a lot of words out. But if you really understand what the essence of grace is, it can really be impactful, not only in your personal life, but it can be impactful in every life that you are connected with. because
Right.
what they see as a result is a demonstration of an essence. And
Hmm.
when someone is coming with all this rah 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 energy and you're not reciprocating that, it's an opportunity to diffuse it.
Yeah.
They take a step back, like, well, okay, she is not responding in the way that I thought she was going to. I need to rethink my strategy. Now we just created a pause.
Right.
So
Which is
that's
so
where I can
important.
take a breath. I can take a breath now because you're not coming at me no more. It's hard.
Yeah.
You took a minute, and now I'll be like, okay, okay, next move. I think that's
I
it.
like that.
I think that's it.
No, those are such beautiful points. And I think it's really important. And I'm glad you shared that with everybody. Now, building off of that,
Yeah.
based on your experiences, again, you've risen above a lot, right? What advice would you give moms who might be going through a divorce right now, who are managing that, their kids, trying to move up in their career, trying to juggle all the balls?
Mhm.
What is some advice you'd give to them?
I would say, and I'm gonna be cliche, really learn to tap into your own grace. Learn to give yourself grace. And what that looks like is understanding that some of the balls don't have to drop.
Hmm.
It's understanding that it's a process. It's understanding that you have more resources and the ability within you than you think you do. And,
Yep.
if you take a moment, you said earlier to just take a pause, take a step back, look at what's happening, assess what's happening, understand where you stand within what's happening, and then come up with a plan, even if it doesn't have to be fully thought through, but just an idea of like, okay, I don't want this. What do you want? And then from
Right.
there, incorporating small little steps that you can take, to reclaim who you are. Because
Yeah.
it starts there. It starts with reclaiming who you are as an individual, as a woman, as a mother, first before, because with the divorce, a lot's going to be happening. If
Yep.
it might be contentious, it might not be contentious. It could be a lot of different things, but being able to find your own sense of peace within and space, even if you got to just go in the bathroom and just sit there and breathe for 10 minutes, like that is something that, I tell my clients to do all the time. Like you can find those moments, right? You can take time for yourself. And even if you got to create it and build it, if you got to wake up an extra 10 minutes early just to have that moment to yourself, do that.
Hmm.
It's an investment in you. It's not a, oh, gotta get up 10 minutes. It's, what, I get to get up at 10 minutes to just focus on me. And then once that
Yep.
10 minutes is over, now I could put that other hat on, right?
Absolutely.
Look at the perspective that you're looking at it from. And if you need to shift, shift.
Hmm. I love this, and I absolutely love talking to you today. It was such a
Same
great
here.
conversation, and I just want to take some key points that I want anybody who's watching to take from this.
Okay.
So, no matter whether you're going through a divorce or just a difficult time in life, I think
Yeah.
these are the key points. Give yourself grace under pressure, right? Give yourself a moment, pause, take a breath. You don't always have to respond instantly. You got to
Mhm.
take time to process, right? And then once you've processed, you take accountability, right? After you take accountability, what's next? What's the next step? And then, most important of all, when you're going through any kind of turmoil, when you're feeling like life is just lifing,
Mm.
remember to reclaim yourself.
Yeah.
Go back to your roots, like, and that can mean so many different things. It can mean taking time to just have those conversations with yourself and
Mm.
reconnecting with who you are as a person. But it could also mean reconnecting with the things you love. Whether in Cheslyn's case it was reconnecting with dance, it could be reconnecting with a career you gave up, it could be reconnecting with friends and family, but reclaim yourself. So I thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope you learned something. I hope you take something positive away from this. And please be sure to go check out Cheslyn's business. And I'm going to let you give your shout out so you can tell them where to find you and how to contact you.
All right. So you can find me on Instagram at Gracefully Affirming. I also have a website, gracefully affirming.com. I also wrote a book called Start with Grace, 7 Moves to Reclaim Your Life After a Setback. And I think it's a good way for you to kind of see, one, it talks about my story, but also to see the trajectory that I followed in order to get to where I am today and the things and the tools that actually helped me. And so check it out.
Thank you so much. And that's Mother Hustlers, the podcast. Thanks for tuning in.